Today we'll be covering Dr. Nicholas Rush. And here we go. Dr. Nicholas Rush is a brilliant, albeit machiavellian, scientist and expert in ancient technology, comparable to the likes of Samantha Carter and Rodney McKay. He is a member of the team sent and later trapped aboard the ancient vessel Destiny. Nicholas Rush was born into a poor family. His father worked in the shipyards of Glasgow. Rush was working 2 jobs until he earned a scholarship to Oxford. Prior to going to work for the Stargate program, Rush was a college professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and worked at Cornell University with Dr. Andrew Corvell. Despite being a professor at Cal, Rush, prior to his visit to Novus, had never experienced an earthquake, even though parts of the university itself lies directly on the San Andreas fault line. At some point, he married Gloria Rush. Later, he was recruited by Dr. Daniel Jackson to work on the 9th Chevron project, which he would spend 2 years on. His wife died from cancer during this period, driving Rush to see fruits of labor at any cost. He was a smoker before boarding Destiny, and a heavy consumer of coffee, drinking several cups a day. He and others in the same situation quickly began going through withdrawal symptoms of lack of caffeine and nicotine abroad. In 2009, Rush was stationed at the Icarus base in order to research the purpose of the Stargate's 9th Chevron. When Eli Wallace discovered the formula that would finally allow them to successfully dial the 9th Chevron, he personally visited Eli, along with Lieutenant General Jack O'Neill, to recruit him into the program. The failure of Eli's formula to make a connection caused some friction between them, as Rush was set in his belief that the address that they were using was right, while Eli was invited to a special dinner being held for the base's guests. Rush cried over a photo of his wife. The base was attacked shortly thereafter, threatening to destroy the planet. Rush, fearing that his life's work would literally go up in flames, enlisted Eli's aid in figuring out how to dial that 9th Chevron. Accepting Eli's unconventional logic that the 9th Chevron address was actually a code, he aborted the dialing sequence to Earth and successfully made a connection with the 9th Chevron, unconvincingly justifying his actions by claiming that the blast from the exploding planet could have followed them back through the wormhole, when he actually could have dialed plenty of active gates in the Milky Way if he was concerned for Earth. Unable to undo his actions, the remaining Icarus personnel were forced to evacuate through the gate, arriving on Destiny, an ancient vessel located in a galaxy billions of light years from home, with no way to get back. After arriving on Destiny, Rush was the first to begin exploring the ship. When he realized that the life support system was failing, he attempted a restart of the system, which he believed would restore normal operations. Eli attempted to dissuade him, believing that doing so could blow up the ship, and Master Sergeant Ronald Greer held Rush at gunpoint to keep him from implementing the plan, as Rush's actions were responsible for stranding them there in the first place. Greer was ordered to stand down by Lieutenant Matthew Scott. Rush was allowed to attempt the restart, but it ended in failure. Later, he was the first to use the long-range communication device, brought aboard by Colonel Everett Young, to inform O'Neill of the situation. Upon returning to the Destiny, he told the crew that O'Neill put him in charge of the expedition, which was at best a very liberal interpretation of O'Neill's orders. The crew did not take well to his self-appointed leadership, but Lieutenant Scott restored order, believing Rush to be their best hope of returning home. Having localized the life support problem to the air filtration system, namely the CO2 scrubbers, and a large hole in one of the shuttles, Rush suggested that someone on board would have to sacrifice themselves to essentially plug the hole, since the airlock doors were damaged. Rush began reviewing personnel, attempting to find the one whose absence would least affect their chances of survival. His efforts were preempted by Senator Alan Armstrong, who took it upon himself to sacrifice his life to seal the damaged shuttle. With that problem dealt with, he focused on trying to repair the scrubbers. Destiny would eventually drop out of FTL in range of a desert planet with the necessary materials, and Rush would join the away team to search for them. The heat of the desert planet eventually became too much for Rush to handle. He gave his remaining water to Scott and asked to return to the Stargate alone. Scott, however, ordered Greer to escort Rush back to the gate and continued on his own. Expecting Greer to share his water on the trip back to the gate, Rush incited an altercation, It ended quickly since Rush could not overpower Greer, and Greer couldn't just shoot him. Hearing over the radio from Eli that Amanda Palmer, Sergeant Curtis, and Dr. Jeremy Franklin intended to go to another nearby planet, he and Greer returned in time to stop Franklin, though they arrived too late to save Curtis and Palmer. Scott eventually managed to locate the necessary materials, and Rush helped integrate them into the failing life support. With that problem resolved, Rush shifted focus from the life support to the ship's power reserves, which were depleting rapidly. Short-tempered due to a lack of sleep, caffeine withdrawal due to a lack of coffee, and nicotine withdrawal due to a lack of cigarettes, he drove away any attempt to help him. When power failed completely, he broke into a rant while explaining the situation to Colonel Everett Young. This devolved into a nervous breakdown and Rush collapsed, remaining unconscious for about 10 hours. He woke up in time to learn that the ship was on course for a potentially livable star system, only for the ship to end up on course for the system's star. Young arranged a lottery to determine who would be allowed to use the shuttle to escape the doomed ship. Rush had Young take his name out, saying that destiny was his destiny and he wanted to die on the ship. Rush spent his remaining time in his room reading. He eventually realized that their impending deaths were behind schedule, and discovered that the ship in fact plotted a course into the star on purpose to recharge its reactors. This posed a problem as the ancient shuttle was about to be left behind. But Rush managed to activate the subspace communication array to contact them. Eli Wallace's planetary slingshot calculations were then transmitted to the shuttle so that they could reach the ship in time. Later, Young invited Rush to join their celebration, but Rush refused, not seeing anything worth celebrating. Young speculates that Rush might have known all along, but the others didn't share his opinion. Several weeks later, Rush and several others determined that the ship's water supplies were disappearing at an impossible rate. The ship stopped at an ice planet, allowing Colonel Everett Young and Lieutenant Matthew Scott to collect more water. Meanwhile, Rush joined the effort to discover the source of the drain, which was revealed to be a colony of dust bugs Scott had accidentally brought back with him from the desert planet. He deliberately kept this information from Young, as Young needed to focus on retrieving more water. Against Eli Wallace's protests, then sternly informed Eli that grown-ups sometimes need to lie for the greater good. While Scott was in the crevasse trapped, he expressed more concern for the ice than for the safe rescue of Scott. He also helped to develop and enact a plan to remove the bugs from the ship. When the International Oversight Advisory put a plan forth to return the crew home, he expressed major concerns over the dangers it presented. When Colonel David Telford assumed command, using the long-range communication device, to enact the plan, he helped under great reluctance, doing everything he could to slow Telford's implementation of the plan, as Telford's rush to enact it put the entire ship at risk. Following Sergeant Hunter Riley's injuries, he confronted Telford on the safety of the plan, blaming Telford for Riley's fate. Rush was present when Telford's team attempted to dial the gate. When it appeared that the plan was doomed to failure, Telford's team left the ship. Making sure that they all left, Rush then ended the experiment. Having staged the entire show as an elaborate ruse to get rid of Telford and prevent a catastrophic incident. Colonel Everett Young would later have Eli Wallace investigate the possible success of this plan, which ended in failure in every scenario Eli ran. During a routine exploration of the ship, Rush and Master Sergeant Ronald Greer discovered the Destiny Interface Chair, a similar device in purpose to the repository of knowledge encountered by Lieutenant General Jack O'Neill. Rush advocated having someone sit in the chair, reasoning that its more primitive design might not be fatal to humans, as the later model was, and that the data it contained could grant them full control of the ship. Colonel Everett Young forbade any access to the chair and asserted that the only person Rush could get to sit in it would be Rush himself. Rush attempted to force the issue by faking the discovery of a planet similar to the Icarus base, but Young remained steadfast in his refusal, and Rush's deception would soon be uncovered by Eli Wallace. When Sergeant Spencer committed suicide, Rush was the first to find the body. Seeing it as an opportunity, he took Spencer's gun and hid it in Colonel Everett Young's room to frame him for the murder. Rush knew that the charge would never stick, but it would create enough reasonable doubt to remove Young from command. This put Camille Ray in charge and gave him the freedom to research the Destiny interface chair. This, in turn, gave Dr. Jeremy Franklin the opportunity to sit in it, rendering him catatonic. Young blamed Rush for Franklin's state, under the belief that Rush was hoping for someone to sit in the chair out of desperation. When Eli Wallace uncovered keynote footage that showed Spencer's suicide and Rush's theft of the weapon, which Rush tried to delete from the archive, he reported it to Young. Young confronted Rush alone on a planet with a damaged alien ship and attacked him. When Rush proved wholly unapologetic about the frame-up, Young knocked Rush unconscious and left him on the planet. After coming to, Rush's first act was to explore the Nakai fighter. In doing so, he triggered a homing beacon which summoned the Nakai. They took him prisoner, probing his mind for information on Destiny. When Colonel Everett Young took control of one of the aliens, through the communication device, the mothership Rush was on confronted Destiny. It attacked and one of the fighters kidnapped Chloe Armstrong. Young attempted to use the communication device to free Chloe, but ended up freeing Rush instead. Rush instructed Young in the use of the alien mind-probing technology, learning the identity of his rescuer, but also breaking the communication link. Rush used the mind probe on the alien to find Chloe's location and teach himself to use their technology, then killed the alien. Unable to get back, Young tried to destroy the mothership. Rush, meanwhile, escaped the ship with Chloe shortly before it went into FTL. In private, Rush and Young decided to bury their rivalry for the sake of the crew. Rush, however, still did not trust Young to be in command, and schemed with Camille Ray to remove him. When the opportunity came, Rush and Camille Ray launched their plan to isolate the military and force them to surrender, while Colonel Everett Young and Lieutenant Matthew Scott were using the ancient shuttle to destroy a Nakai fighter that was attached to the hull. Rush started to transfer control from the control interface room to a research lab. This caused the shuttle's docking clamps to fail. Rush was forced to stop the transfer prematurely so that they could dock, losing control of the life support as a result. He then bargained to have Eli Wallace brought over to his side, requiring Eli's assistance in bolstering the shields for an impending alien attack. The true reason behind his mutiny was that the aliens implanted a transmitter inside his chest, and he feared Young might kill him trying to remove it. Young managed to end the mutiny during the attack and ordered the transmitter removed. Chloe used the long-range communication device to switch with Dr. Brightman, who, with the aid of Lieutenant Tamara Johannesson, was able to remove the device. Destiny managed to weather the assault and escape into FTL. When Destiny dropped out of FTL near an uncharted star, Rush used the time to strengthen their shields in unexplored sections of the ship. One of the teams found a robot, which Rush decided to leave be while they dealt with the more important matters. In his off time, he also began working on carving a chess set. Colonel Everett Young tried again to bury the hatchet with Rush, expressing his own fondness for the game. A short time later, Rush and Dr. Adam Brody modified the Destiny interface chair, so Rush could use it safely in an attempt to glean the ship's master code. Once in the chair, his experience took the form of a lucid dream of his days just prior to joining the Stargate program. Treating it as a distraction, he ignored the visions of Gloria Rush, despite her failing health, though he did take some time to comfort her. Eventually, he realized that the number 46 kept appearing everywhere he looked. Realizing that this was the key to deciphering the master code, he left the program, stopping to have a heartfelt conversation with the vision of his wife about his immoral behavior. He then devised a program to decipher the master code based on what he learned. During his time in the chair, a team consisting of Lieutenant Matthew Scott, Master Sergeant Ronald Greer, Eli Wallace, and Chloe Armstrong were stranded on a planet and unable to return to Destiny before it jumped to FTL. With the help of other scientists, Rush was able to produce a map of the gate system in the galaxy and Destiny's position relative to it. With the knowledge that Destiny was about to leave the galaxy, Rush and Lieutenant Vanessa James led a rescue mission in an attempt to retrieve the lost away team. They split to cover more ground when it became clear that Destiny had bypassed numerous gates. James's team found Greer, while Rush came back empty-handed. Unfortunately, Rush's team dialed in just as Scott, Eli, and Chloe, who managed to find an alternate route, were trying to do the same, blocking them. Destiny left the galaxy before it could dial again. Rush quickly discovered that Destiny lacked the power to make the trip across the void. Rush proposed using the long-range communication device to bring aboard Dr. Amanda Perry, a hyperdrive specialist. The Nakai used this opportunity to take control of Lieutenant Vanessa James and sabotage the faster-than-light engine. This gave Lieutenant Matthew Scott, Eli Wallace, and Chloe Armstrong the chance to dial back in. Eli gave Rush back his glasses, which he had lost on the Nakai fighter, from which he was abducted. Eli, Rush, and Perry managed to repair the drive. The aliens attacked Destiny before the system could be restarted, but with the help of Dr. Jeremy Franklin and the Destiny Interface Chair, Destiny was able to enter FTL again, and make the journey across the void. Sometime later, Rush was one of several people infected with hallucinogenic-inducing tics. His hallucinations took the form of an invasion by the Nakai. Meanwhile, Master Sergeant Ronald Greer's hallucinations took the form of another mutiny by Rush and Camille Ray. Seeing Greer as an alien, Rush fled into a supply room, followed by Greer. Greer, in turn, was followed by Ray. Seeing Ray as an alien too, Rush stabbed her with a screwdriver, before being knocked out by Greer. Greer was subdued before he could kill either Rush or Ray, and Rush was also restrained when he began attacking everyone in sight. The tics were removed by Lieutenant Tamara Johannesson, restoring them to normal. After using the long-range communication device to switch with Colonel David Telford, Rush began seeing pieces of Telford's memory, which indicated that he was a spy for the Lucine Alliance. He advised Colonel Everett Young of the situation and arranged to switch with Telford during the next scheduled contact with Earth in order to confirm his suspicions. He successfully made contact with the Alliance, pretending to be Telford, but was betrayed by his lack of knowledge of their procedures. He was kidnapped and taken off the planet by a Teltac. He was tortured by Commander Kiva into revealing his identity, then taken to their base, a recreation of the Icarus Project. Rush was forced into completing their work, into dialing the 9th chevron, while Telford was interrogated by Young on Destiny. Rush stalled as much as he could, which gave Young the time needed to break Telford's brainwashing and to get the location of the Alliance base. The George Hammond was dispatched to rescue Rush, but instead forced the Alliance to dial ahead of schedule, reaching Destiny at the expense of blowing up the planet. Upon arrival, Telford and Rush were returned to their own bodies. Rush managed to escape the conflict that followed, and remained in the control interface room, as Young attempted to resolve the situation. He continually advocated a quick and decisive solution, since the Alliance had hostages and would kill them no matter the circumstances. Rush insisted on trying to rescue them, which put them at odds. Matters were further complicated by a nearby binary pulsar, which emitted regular bursts of gamma rays that were slowly depleting Destiny's shields and disrupting power, foiling one of Rush's attempted rescue plans. A solution was discovered, but Young had to surrender to Kiva in order to implement it. Telford was working as a mole in her ranks, and Rush and Dr. Adam Brody moved to another area of the ship so he could transfer control back to them after Kiva had secured the hostages in one location. His plan was interrupted before he could fully implement it. Telford's efforts were not entirely in vain, as Rush had been given enough control of the ship to affect the power systems. Using this, he drew power away from the shields in order to force the Alliance to surrender, lest they die from radiation. He and a small group hid in the hydroponics lab, which would prove to be enough protection for them to survive the radiation burst. Despite the fact that some of the crew were still outside, Rush persisted in his plan, and the Alliance surrendered to save themselves. Not long after, Rush's program to break the master code worked. Using it, he gained access to the bridge, from which he could control all of Destiny's systems. However, he decided to keep this information to himself. Without a trained crew, he wanted to understand each system first. More importantly, he didn't trust Colonel Everett Young, believing him to be unfit to lead the mission. While on the bridge, he was haunted by a vision of his wife Gloria Rush, who questioned his decisions and motives at every turn. A vision of Dr. Jeremy Franklin also appeared to him, serving to question Rush's technical deductions. With his new control over the ship, he stopped Destiny at a planet with an inactive Stargate, as the crew needed food supplies desperately. The ancient shuttle was sent to the planet, but Rush failed to account for the severity of the atmospheric turbulence, which damaged the shuttle and caused it to crash. While the shuttle team worked to fix the gate, Rush brought the ship out of FTL as soon as possible in order to reach them. Though successful, Sergeant Hunter Riley died from his injuries, which Rush blamed himself for. The ship then notified him of an approaching object, which it dropped out of FTL to meet. The object the ship detected was a seed ship, which for some reason was dead in space. Destiny docked with the ship and began downloading a large amount of data. Rush was more eager to explore the ship than analyze the data, but Colonel Everett Young insisted that Rush decode the data as quickly as possible. He managed to excuse himself and visit the bridge, from which he detected a large amount of reserve power, enough to dial the Stargate to Earth. He decided not to tell anyone, reasoning that they would figure it out on their own, which they did. Meanwhile, an alien was discovered on the ship. Rush was sent over to the ship to facilitate a power transfer, while Lieutenant Tamara Johannesson was brought aboard to examine an alien. After it woke up, Rush gave advice in communicating with it, with little success. When the power transfer to dial the gate began, the rest of the aliens stunned Rush and reversed the transfer, threatening to drain Destiny permanently. Rush was carried out by Master Sergeant Ronald Greer, and upon reviving immediately went to the bridge to disconnect the two ships before the power drain reached an irreversible state. Colonel David Telford, who was attempting to counter the power drain from the seed ship, was stranded. The Vision of Gloria Rush wondered whether Rush had broken the connection out of concern for the ship or to save his dream. A few days later, after discovering an unmanned Yersinia spaceship, Rush and Colonel Everett Young went on board to examine it. Rush accidentally enabled the sublight engines by mistake, and the ship began to accelerate away from Destiny. Rush then enlisted the help of Dr. Amanda Perry, via Ginn, and indirectly told her to go to Destiny's bridge. But when Eli Wallace, Dr. Adam Brody, and Dr. Dale Volker discovered the bridge, Rush was forced to fight Young and tell him about Destiny's mission. Later, Simeon killed Perry, who was occupying Ginn's body at the time, and left the ship for an unknown planet. Rush, bent on enacting revenge for the death of Perry, followed Simeon through the Stargate. After a long chase in the desert, Rush finally killed Simeon by shooting him in the head. Before dialing Earth in a star, Rush convinced Colonel Everett Young and 10 others to stay aboard the ship. However, a malfunction caused everyone but Rush to evacuate through the Stargate. The malfunction caused the wormhole to jump to an alternate reality 2,000 years in the past. Rush then traveled 12 hours back in time to warn the crew not to dial Earth while in the star, because it would destroy the ship. However, the future Destiny was stable for the time being, and the future Rush convinced the past Rush to go to the future Destiny from the past Destiny to salvage parts. 2010. Rush learned that Dr. Amanda Perry's consciousness was fixed in the long-range communication stones, which were being used by Chloe Armstrong. To solve the problem, Rush downloaded Perry's consciousness into Destiny's memory banks. He later transferred his own consciousness to Destiny's memory banks so that he could be with Dr. Amanda Perry. He became angry with Eli Wallace, who had placed Perry and Ginn in a quarantine section of the memory bank to save his life. Later, the Destiny expedition encountered people who claimed to be their descendants from the alternate timeline that was created during the dialing within a star attempt. When Colonel Everett Young agreed to transport the people to their homeworld Novus, Rush complained about the waste of CO2 scrubbing. When the Destiny arrived at Novus, Rush found many boxes that contained a scrubber substance. Elated, Rush took the boxes back to Destiny, where there would be clean air for years to come. When the drones started to blockade the stars in Destiny's path, Rush worked with Eli to find another solution, trying to go to a star off Destiny's path, but finding it blocked too. Rush supported Eli's plan to use a blue giant star to recharge and insisted that he and Eli were the most qualified to perform the task. During the preparation, he let Eli decide who would pilot the ship and who would co-pilot, letting him take the lead, as it was his plan. When Eli tried to free Lisa Park from the garden, and it's taking too long, Rush convinces him that he can't waste any more time on it, as he needs Eli to focus on piloting the ship. Eli reluctantly agrees, and the two pilot the ship through a star. When Eli panics and doesn't believe he can keep ahead of the Veritables, Rush encourages him, telling him that he's the only one who can do it. They successfully pilot the ship through the star, but the dome breaches. While Eli rushes to rescue Park, Rush finally manages to open the door for them and cools the ship off, starting with the gate room so that the crew can return. When they return 10 minutes early, Rush meets them and informs Young of their success. He also tells him that he checks Eli's calculations through the journey through the star, and they were completely perfect, and calls it genius, but asks Young not to tell Eli that he said that. Rush explains that while they have now successfully recharged, the tactic isn't likely to work again. Using Destiny's sensors and the drone communication frequency he and Eli learned from the drones they captured, Rush and Eli discovered that the drones are blockading every planet in Destiny's path with the Stargate in order to attack them while they are resupplying. Rush reports with Young to Telford, who explain that Earth is unable to resupply Destiny and that the crew can't go off the path to find other planets because there's very little chance in finding one in time. On the ship, Rush proposes attacking the drones in order to resupply, modulating the shields using information on their weapon frequency taken from the captured drone. The crew attacks a control ship at a planet. While Rush's tactic initially works, the drones get around it by doing suicide runs on the ship before Destiny gets into position to destroy the control ship. However, the crew isn't able to collect much supplies, and Eli proposes the crew enter Destiny's stasis pods for 3 years and bypass the rest of the galaxy. Rush disagrees, but as he doesn't have a better plan, Young decides to go with it unless Rush can come up with anything else in 24 hours. He isn't able to, but explains to Chloe that he worries that bypassing the rest of the galaxy could cause them to miss out on an important part of the pattern Destiny is seeking. The crew starts to enter stasis, but it is discovered that 8 of the pods are damaged, and unless they can be fixed, 8 people will have to remain out of stasis. Initially unable to do so due to the drones blockading the only planet nearby that has what they need, Rush helps implement a plan come up with by Park to draw the drones in using a shuttle, and then detonate its engines once close to destroy the control ship that shows up. Eli and Rush remote pilot the shuttle and successfully destroy the control ship. After all the pods are fixed, all but the senior staff, including Rush, enter stasis, and the staff has a final dinner together. Rush is surprised when Young, while describing the crew as a family, refers to him as the crazy uncle who always comes through. Afterwards, all but he, Eli, and Young enter stasis. Rush discovers that one pod is too badly damaged to fix in time, and that one person could remain out for 2 weeks and try to fix it before having to shut down the life support system and die. Rush volunteers, not expecting Young to allow it, but is surprised when he hears from Young that Eli has decided to do it instead. Rush is unable to convince Eli not to do it. Despite admitting to Eli that he has great potential and hates to see it wasted, he then enters stasis along with Young, addressing Eli as Mr. Wallace when saying goodbye to him.